Good afternoon. Wow, it's a pretty big space here. So I'm Saul. I've been doing this talk for the last couple of years, and what I want to talk about today is what I'm calling the majority world. And what is the majority world? Well, newsflash for those of you who haven't realized it, at the Web Summit, the internet is just getting bigger and bigger. So there are now over 3 billion people who are active on the internet, and we're getting to the point where literally half of the world's population is online. The thing that I really want to focus on, though, is that actually the internet is no longer a US and European internet. The internet already is basically a China and India internet. Already 32% of the global internet is in China and in India, and if you can see, both China and India have an enormous amount of room to grow. If you compare that to the US and Europe, we currently only have 14% of the global internet in the US and Europe, and actually there's very little room to grow. Both the US, Europe, or key European markets already passed 8 out of 10 people online. So if you think about it, we already are, we being Western Europe and the US, we are already less than the 20%. And the internet is not going to stop growing. In fact, today, if you look at the total internet users by country, the UK, which is obviously a huge internet market, top of the G20 in terms of internet penetration, and France are both already smaller than Nigeria. How many folks here have been to Nigeria? Okay, maybe about 10. So, we sit here, we sit in London, we sit in New York, we sit in San Francisco, and we have this global perspective. And this is a slide that basically shows what percentage of the internet usage is desktop, which is the blue line, mobile, the green line, and then tablets and consoles. And it looks here, and some smart people in the US and in Europe really believe mobile, the green line, is going to be the future. And I think many of us here would believe that mobile is going to be the future. But actually, if you're in the majority world, in Asia, where the green line crossed the blue line a while back, or in Africa, mobile is the present. So are we living in a world, in our markets, that really tells us what is going on, or actually is what's going on out there? And when you look at smartphone growth, the fastest growing markets for smartphones are the Middle East and Africa. And when you look at when our kids are going to be parents by 2050, if you look at the areas of orange, all of the major population growth is going to be happening in Africa. So by 2050, a quarter of the world's population is going to be in Africa. And this is something that I think is, it's literally on Europe's doorstep, and it's something to be aware of. And when you think about what percentage of the mobile internet is going on in the world, in which countries is mobile the most prevalent way to access the internet? Number 1, Nigeria. Number 2, India. Number 3, South Africa. In all of those countries, over 50% of the internet usage is via mobile. If you look at the UK, it's 23%. So really, these countries are living in the future. They're living in a different world from us. And when you look at some of the companies who've done incredibly well over the last 10 years, who've invested in some of these markets, like a South African company, Naspers, who owned 50% of Tencent before it went public. Xiaomi, who today announced that they are moving into South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria. all of these companies, including a European company, Rocket Internet, are focusing on these majority world markets. And actually, this is a movie we've seen before. This is a slide from Mary Meeker's last Internet Trends presentation, and basically looks at the fact that, living in a world where China or India are becoming the largest economies on the planet is not news. China was 15 times bigger than the US as an economy 200 years ago. So we have seen this movie before. And if you follow the money, actually investment in China, in Asia, is actually almost as high from venture capital perspective as it is in the US. So what's going on here? I mean, are we looking to repeat these epic tales of transport and trade, when new huge empires are being created? If people haven't read this book about Genghis Khan and the making of the modern world, I recommend it. But the empires today are actually, messaging, their blockchain, the major platforms of the future are being built online and using these new distributed architectures, and of course on mobile. So I would say we're now really living in the majority world, the world where we are no longer the majority, sitting here in Europe or in the US, and we really have to think about this market. And if you think about it, Facebook, with 1.5 billion monthly active users, is really a proxy for this humanity. This is a world that's online, but it's not a world that necessarily is employed. If you look at the red areas, these are areas where youth unemployment, or unemployment in general, is 10 to 15% or more. 230 million people live outside of their home countries, some for asylum, some for refuge, some just because they're trying to find a better life for their families and better economic opportunity. And these are people often going to countries where there's extremely high youth unemployment, to Spain, to Greece, to South Africa. South Africa has absorbed more refugees in the last 10 years from Zimbabwe, 4 million Zimbabweans, than anything that we're trying to deal with Syria at the moment. A lot of these people also are in countries where they have less collective representation than ever before. Governments are in debt. But look, at the same time, the tech giants have massive amounts of cash on their balance sheets. Apple, Microsoft, Google all have hundreds of billions of dollars on their balance sheet. We've created unicorns worth tens, hundreds of billions of dollars, over 100 new unicorns in the last 5 years. And something we talked about last year is this notion of entrepreneurship. Last year, when we did this talk, there were 56 million zebras, people interested in entrepreneurship on Facebook. This year, that number has more than doubled. So we have this wave of zebras, people who are really trying to build their own lives, their own economic destiny around the world. And there are cities in the world, actually, where people interested in entrepreneurship is more than 10% of that city's population: Stockholm, Tel Aviv. And when you look at places like Stanford, if you look at 5 of the top universities in the world, Stanford, Oxford, Cambridge, Yale, and Harvard, 6 out of 10 people interested in entrepreneurs at those universities are Stanford. Stanford is like the Vatican for entrepreneurship. In fact, Stanford has more zebras than Berlin. So what's going on? Are we living in a fairy tale? This is for my daughter and my son. And me, I like this movie. Or is this just some strange new world of zebras and unicorns, where we have these tech giants worth $200 billion or more, now bigger than any other companies in the world, other than energy companies or companies in the financial sectors? These are companies that are now being run by millennials. For the first time, millennials are the largest part of the workforce. And these millennials have different attitudes. They move more for work. The tools that they use for work, Slack, Trello, Skype, have changed our ability to work and to move. People have a different attitude to leisure because of Airbnb and Uber. People are less focused on owning assets, whether those are houses, cars, phones, computers, energy. And in a sense, this move from ownership to a world where we're happy to rent, to borrow, to swap, to donate assets changes opportunities radically. So who should we be backing here? The elephants, the unicorns, or the zebras? So if you look at where the zebras and the unicorns are, in the cities, they're in cities like San Francisco. They're in companies like Apple. They're in universities like Stanford. When you look at Europe, we have huge tradition in Europe. When I was doing research here, I had no idea that Lisbon and Malaga were hundreds of years older than London. I had no idea that a bank like Barclays was 325 years old. We've got universities that are nearly 1,000 years old. Huge amounts of cultural heritage, legacy, and understanding. And what are we going to do with these assets? Because right now, Europe has too many elephants. The elephants of the Forbes 2000, in terms of their proportion of elephants to unicorns. The US is actually pretty well balanced. But actually, when you look at where entrepreneurship is growing fastest, it's not necessarily growing fastest in the US. It's growing fastest in markets and economies where people really need to innovate, like Spain, Vietnam, Argentina, or markets that are sort of becoming more entrepreneurial, like Germany. All of these are markets where you've seen more than 300% growth year on year in terms of the interest in entrepreneurship. And these unicorns sometimes create massive economic impact. Think of the opportunities and the jobs mobile messaging, marketplaces, and money have created already. Think about the freelance zebras, the millions of jobs being created for drivers, for delivery people to earn, albeit 50 to 100,000 pounds, dollars a year. This is new income that is being created by these platforms. Look at what is happening for the services industry, with hospitality, with catering. If you have skills in software and data science, in design, in the future teaching, healthcare, these new platforms are creating tens of millions of jobs and job opportunities. And we just saw Kickstarter, which is just an incredible example of a unicorn that is really facilitating zebras. And the same is true of SoundCloud, of YouTube, of Wattpad, of Medium, etc. So what I'd like people to sort of think about is, until Europe is able to create these $50 billion unicorns, the Airbnbs, the Ubers, we need to be the best place in Europe for zebras, for entrepreneurs, for people who want to make a difference in their own lives and in the society around them. Because the kids we have are going to live in a different world. There is not a single European country on the top 10 population list by 2050. And what do we really know about India or China? You can go to the conferences in Bangalore, in Hong Kong, but what do you know? What do I know? What do our kids really know about these markets? And if you look at the world, and where the lights are turned on, a lot of the future actually is in the dark, in Africa, in Asia. So I would just say, let's get out there, let's take advantage of these new opportunities, because the world is now connected. And I spent 3 months in Africa earlier this year, and for me, it was a massive eye-opener. And I would encourage people, really, particularly in Europe, the open opportunities are there. They're in Asia, they're in Africa. We can learn from the US, but I think the future is no longer there. So thank you very much. I'm Cape on Twitter. And this is the majority world. Thank you.